All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the INSEAD Tech Talk today. My name is Francesca Naku, INSEAD MBA 25D. I'm part of the TMT Club, and I'll be hosting the session today. Today's webinar is part of the Tech Talk X series by Digital at INSEAD. We are dedicated to exploring new digital technologies, their applications, as well as their impact on management, business, and society. For more information, please visit the Digital at INSEAD website. And I'd also like to take this moment to thank our sponsor, Accenture, for today's series. And before we dive into Horacio's presentation, let me do a few things to do some light housekeeping. One, audience is muted, so video and chat functions are disabled. Should you have any questions, please use the Q&A tab. If I can ask the questions to be short and to the point, that'll help us manage our time here. And then to help us identify the most relevant questions, feel free to vote on existing questions within that tab. Lastly, the webinar is being recorded, so should you encounter any technical issues or want to grab a copy of that recording, feel free to email digital@insead.edu. Now, let me introduce you to our speaker today, Horacio. He is a professor of management practice at the decision science area, and he teaches and researches on negotiation science. He is also the co-founder of the Negotiation and Conflict Management Collaborative, NCMC for short, and the director of INSEAD's Executive Education Negotiation Dynamics program. Without further ado, I'll pass the mic on to you, Horacio.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Francesca, for the kind introduction. And thank you, everyone who signed up and is here today to hear a bit about the ideas on negotiation and AI. So let me get started putting up the slides there. And this is actually based on an article I wrote and published a few months back, but it's still pretty relevant. And I've been scanning the industry to just see, are there any major shifts and major changes? And while, of course, there are some advancements, there are no major shifts so far. So I think it's still pretty relevant, and hopefully you'll find it useful as well. I look forward to your questions. So let's get started. So the idea that I'm going to be covering today is so what is the context? There's a little bit of history as well. What is AI's roles, opportunities, and challenges, and how does it actually does this collaboration, this marrying with negotiation, and hopefully then helping us think about the future trends and understanding, as the title of the session of today goes, is that a game changer, or is just another tool, and how should we be looking at it? So to get started then, while it seems pretty new, AI and negotiation have been working together since the 80s. So way before LLMs, there were a lot of tools that were being used, which I'll cover in the next slide, to basically try to help us handle the complexity, like the computational power that sometimes is needed for you to consider different scenarios in negotiation, different options, different prices, and different combinations, and all of that. Then, of course, there were already enough software tools, enough machine intelligence, and others that we've been using for quite a while now to try to understand negotiation better and facilitate us into optimizing decisions. Yeah, the idea was that a lot of these tools were there to reduce information asymmetry, decision costs, and others that will hopefully help us in a more normative manner, get us closer to what would be an ideal outcome, an ideal decision negotiation-wise. It had been used in many businesses for quite a bit of time. The idea is that it does help to improve business decisions. The research on that is quite solid, but there's still a need for expertise, time, and investment, not only from the company, but the individuals involved. One of the main things that I would like to invite you to consider after this session today is to start early, start experimenting early. Meaning, even if there's not something that I would argue is a massive game changer just yet, I think that something is coming, maybe sooner than we expect, with this exponential growth that we've been seeing as of late of machine learning and AI in general. And so I would argue that those who are playing with it a bit more are going to be faster to adopt it, and with the pace of change might be able to transform that into a significant competitive advantage. So this is just to give you a quick show of the technologies that have been already studied and researched around negotiation that relate to AI in general. So machine learning, deep learning, computer vision, even natural language processing. So computer vision to try to recognize emotions. Even I did some research of that some 8-9 years ago. Analyzing texts and seeing patterns in the choice of words and others to see what is the underlying messages, and can we identify lies and things of sorts. That has been done already for quite a few years now. And even in robotics, in terms of physical interaction, like raising and touching and shaking hands and things of sorts, to see if there's an impact on that, already kind of envisioning the idea that eventually we were going to have robots maybe doing this for us, like actual robots, not just bots. And then a lot of these systems were using different models. So for example, rule-based, like an A-B thing. So if A happens, you do this. If B happens, you do that. Very heavy on programming, right? Predictive analytics, so the kind of forecasting possibilities given what the data you're seeing so far. The idea of Gen models, Gen AI, which is something a little bit more recent. And eventually we're looking at autonomous systems that can take us from A to Z. And so one of the things that seems a bit more of a game changer and got people a lot more excited, of course, the ChatGPT, the Gen AI, the LLMs really played with our imagination, kind of felt like magic at the beginning. And they open a possibility, particularly on negotiation, because suddenly you have this dialogue going on. Suddenly you have someone on the other side that seems to be a human actually having a genuine conversation with you, and you can take it in any direction that you would not be able to predict some of the details if you're pre-programming the rule-based system, for example, and they would just respond. And this actually, the natural feel of it, the fact that it feels like a conversation, of course, it became very explicit now that the time for AI to start embracing negotiation was here. And so, of course, we are seeing a jump in terms of how the two, negotiation and AI, are collaborating right now. And there is a more, of course, this user-friendly, this idea that anyone can pick it up. Anyone can get one of these LLM platforms out there and start playing with it, start role-playing with it, say, hey, pretend to be a seller, I'll be a buyer, teach me how to negotiate for a car discount, and things of sorts. But the other problem is that there's still a lot of opaque reasoning and still a lot of unpredictable output. So the technology is not just yet there to give us all that we might now be imagining with possibilities, given that we already saw. So right now, from what I scanned, I saw three main modes in which AI, now the new Gen AI, the LLMs, and negotiator are collaborating. The first one is what I'm calling assistance. Basically, AI is a support tool. So think of it as you're still the engine, you're still the person who's pedaling and deciding the directions, but you now have an engine like the bike that helps you go a little further and a little faster. So this is, of course, a great development and can help a lot of negotiators. This is something I actually already using on a daily basis, and many of you might already be doing some of that. Then the next step is already like, it requires more investment. We're starting to see a few companies doing what we're calling semi-automation. So it's like being in a car. You're not the one that is generating the energy anymore, but you still have the steering wheel. So that's why semi-autonomous. So there's something that is helping you push forward. You can go much farther, much faster, but you still tell when to turn right, when to turn left, and when to stop. And then the third, as some of you already probably predicted, is the fully automation, where you expect an end-to-end negotiator, almost as an avatar, just going out there and negotiating on your behalf from beginning to end, right? You give an instructions that you will give any person, and off they go, right? And while we are not there yet on that one, we have some players in the industry who are starting to play with that in different ways. And so I'll talk about that soon. So let's go one by one. First, what do they have in common? And the idea is that all of those are trying to move us from an art, negotiation as an intuition, as an experience, to there is a science behind it. There's game theory, there's psychology, their optimization, their decision rules and things. All of that put together can definitely generate a superior negotiation approach. And so that's one of the things that AI is helping us do. The other one is leveraging some of these sciences that I just mentioned, which on paper, they look great. On research, they look great. They actually show that you can get better results. But the cognitive limitations, the bounded rationality of a human being just kind of makes it so that we don't use them. It's just too hard to use. It's just too complicated. And so we just drop it. So suddenly these tools now that we've been researching for decades, suddenly they become real tools that we might use if we have a combination of human and machine, which is then the third thing they all have in common. Even the last one, which is full automation, still requires human interaction, human input, sorry to say. So you still require a collaboration. You cannot just fully outsource the full automation just yet, right? So for example, there's a lawsuit now going on in Canada, or actually I think it just finished, where Air Canada had bots negotiating with potential customers, and some bots start over-promising things, and then Air Canada said, oh, sorry, there was a mistake with the bot. And the courts are like, The moment you put a bot out there to be your negotiation agent, it is your negotiation agent. So if the bot misbehaved, much like if a human agent of yours had misbehaved, you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to fulfill the promise. And so given that decision, I'm assuming a lot of companies are looking at it and go like, whoa, how much do I want my bot to do just yet? And how good does my bot need to be? Because even if it's a 1% mistake rate and 99% perfect, that 1% could be a big mistake. It could be like a massive mistake. Because again, when they hallucinate, they might go all the way out of boundaries. They would not make a human level mistake of doing a little bit off solid bounds. They might do a completely out of bounds mistake. Right? So those are some of the things for us to start thinking about already, what they have in common, all three of them. So on the assistance mode, it actually goes two ways. It goes on preparation mode and it goes on training mode. So let's call that A and B, for example. So preparation mode will be someone like me. I'm preparing for a negotiation tomorrow. I'll negotiate my salary with INSEAD, or I'll negotiate something with my wife. And when I do that, I might use Gen AI to help me prepare. So it would kind of like give me data on salaries in other places, or can you actually play scenarios for me, or can you imagine different combinations of numbers and options, and given everything I want, what else could I want? And then Gen AI can say, well, someone in your place might want to also ask for these other things. So it will enrich my preparation in a way that hopefully will make me get to a very solid preparation mode actually very quickly. And not only that, I'm not doing it alone. It's a dialogue of sorts. So I'm learning, I'm asking, and I'm going on. And so I've already seen people do preparations that just 3 years before I could not expect my students to do, meaning without investing a significant amount of hours. So the efficiency and the quality of preparation can somewhat skyrocket if people engage those platforms in an intelligent way. So learning how to structure preparation and use these LLMs as a coach and as a colleague, as a partner in your team, is a fantastic way of leveraging already what we have in the market. Of course, you always have to double check some of the data if you're looking for legitimacy, like what is the standard for this, what's the best practice for that, because again, it could still hallucinate and make mistakes, but the success rate is already pretty high and is just getting higher. And then what you can do as well is you can ask them to role play with you a bit, and you can stress test some strategies you have, and you say, hey, what if we go down this road? And you can even play dialogues with it, and that actually starts getting us into the training box. And so in the training box, what we have is the idea that before we used to have text-based role play, right? So we will get a piece of paper, another student will get a piece of paper, and we will role play. And that's already an advance in creating interactive experience for learning negotiation. Now, you don't need the other person. Now, you can actually use the LLM. So what we're doing now in a lot of different places, we're starting to see a few companies, and full disclosure, I'm actually a partner in one of them, which I'll mention soon. The idea is that you can now have an avatar or any AI agent on the other side being your role play counterpart. And that opens so many possibilities, because now you have this interactive exercise that is great for skill building. You can play the scenario 1,000 times if you want, with someone who can always go back to being naive. In other words, they can start from zero, or you can say, let's start from this point and just see what inflection point you might have missed or not. And so you can really work the micro skills of different moments, as well as the strategic skill of embracing the whole thing. As you can see here, there are a few companies that I mentioned. You can search that out. The one that I mentioned I'm a partner in is Connect, just again for full disclosure. Yeah. And the beauty is also that once you have these platforms going on, they are scalable. So you can do 1,000 people at once. You don't have to go to the logistic of organizing them in pairs and things of sorts. The system does that for you and much easier. Why? Because the pair is every student with the computer. So it's already paired up. You can customize scenarios on culture, on industry. You can even modulate if you want someone more aggressive, someone less aggressive, someone more win-win, someone more win-lose. And that could generate so many opportunities. So imagine you're sending teams to negotiate across culture. You can practice that with these platforms. And so there are all sorts of very, very many possibilities to enhance the quality and the quantity of learning that will come from using these platforms. So these companies are already programming around that platform and creating functionalities that will help people generate that, and companies train a lot of people at a much higher level at a much lower cost. So the possibilities there are quite impressive. Here's just to show a little bit of what it's still looking, but is already changing very quickly. You might get into a platform, and I use the Connect one because I have access to it. And so here will be your counterparty, which is an AI agent. There might be even a video with that person kicking off the negotiation. And then you kind of type something here, and then you start having that text base. There are platforms already that are experimenting with voice. So you get voice to voice or voice to text. And pretty soon we're going to be seeing full-blown avatars. Someone like, you could be seeing me here thinking it's me, but it's actually an avatar that was pre-programmed, and it's just filling in the text from the Gen AI platform. So a combination of technologies that really make you feel like you're negotiating with someone through a video conference technology, but it's actually just a full computer exercise. And so this actually opens not only possibilities in terms of it's prettier, it's easier, it's more real term, but it really kind of contextualizes you into a situation where you can design people to look intimidating and others, and start generating subjective and more unconscious skills, so that when people translate what they're learning in these platforms into real life, there's very little translation effort needed. It feels as if they're just doing the same. And that then means that your practice becomes very close to your reality, and your performance then transfer from one to the other will be much closer and much more accurate and much better than if you have a very different environment where you have to be translating the practice into the real game. Then in such elements as well, you can track enormous amounts of data, emotional data, other data, text data, and that also allows for very customized feedback to each individual. So while you might be doing this to 1,000 people in your company or 10,000 people in your company, each of them will have access to very individualized feedback saying, here's where you actually did something really good, and notice your trust improved. But here it seems like you did something bad and your trust plummeted. What happened? And you can go back to the text or back to the videos and reanalyze everything, and then try again until you feel good. We can also link that to call the coach. The coach can then speak, okay, maybe this is the theory you should be looking at a little bit more, have little videos. So the possibilities, and all of those we would be expecting to happen within a year or two, given the pace of change that we're seeing in this industry. So what are we seeing? The LLMs, they're still not very human-like. They seem somewhat artificial. They always write certain number of sentences. They use certain expressions too repeatedly. They kind of give away that they are an LLM. And so part of what these companies are working on is to create an experience that feels much more human-like, which has all of these components that are there on the slide. I'm not going to overread that to you, but that also even have some fallibility, some weaknesses, but consistently with human variabilities and not just subtly massive hallucinations. I already mentioned some of these things here that are there. And then, of course, just make it easier as a tool. Yeah, dashboard, exams, gradings, and others functionalities on top of it, so that it becomes also easier for the professor to put forward to the students, because that of course, will be one of the barriers to entry that has to be overcome. But soon we're going to probably have to also see self-paced exercises where people can go in and say, okay, here's a fully contained exercise through AI. Please engage and go for it, and it will take you from A to Z. When that's coming, still don't know, but it's hard not to imagine that happening at some point. Then let's go into the semi-automation mode, the second mode that I mentioned before. And so this here is one of the companies. And again, full disclosure, also a partner in this one. Those are the two companies I'm a partner, no more. So no more is coming. But the idea here is that imagine in negotiation, you have something called the Pareto frontier. For those of you who studied with me, you may have heard about that. And what happens with most people is that they get suboptimal deals, whereas the frontier, you're at an optimal place. If you get a deal within the frontier, you're in a suboptimal place. And part of that is because of the cognitive demands that actually are required, computationally speaking, for you to actually take it to the optimal point. It's really, really hard for two humans to just randomly get there. And of course, there are all sorts of techniques for you to do, like make it a little better for one, and then make it a little better for the other, and then make it a little better for both. But there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of iterations, and it's very hard to know when to actually stop and when you actually arrived. Whereas in the semi-automation mode, they use the AI to exactly do that computational exercise to you, and then they can make proposals like, hey, how about this idea? If you're here, it seems like you like A and B, so here's a place where it's better for you and better for them at the same time, and at the frontier, do you think that would be a better idea? And so it helps you by actually doing that legwork for you, And therefore, it defines issues, it defines value packages, and it improves the speed and transparency. And it actually reduces anxiety because you're still in control. At the end of the day, you still say, I like this idea, I don't like this idea. And by the way, I approve the contract or I don't approve a contract. So there's still that human hand there. And actually, sometimes the semi-automated mode might still be actually a design choice. It's not a failure in the system or the system is not good enough. It could be a design choice exactly to help people understand what. Since the technology is not perfect yet, since the agents might still hallucinate, and since if they do those mistakes, there could be significant liability for company, making sure that at least if you're not talking about a really long tail exercise, but if you're talking about negotiations that have significant more value, making sure that there's that human oversight there is still an important aspect on this, let's call it maybe transition until we have some much significantly improved and accurate and perfected AI, Gen AI, LLMs negotiating on our behalf. So this is one of the platforms. So as you can see, it's slightly different from the normal LLM that you probably saw where their text boxes are alternating. Is actually more of a gamified, is more graphics where you kind of go right or left in choosing more or less of what you want. There's also significant more transparency. You see all the issues at once. And so you have a whole view of the package. So there's a lot of design there. And one of the things that I like about this platform, and one of the reasons why I'm invested in it, is because it really tried to think negotiation through AI, as opposed to just trying to replicate what we do as negotiators in AI, is to say, what are the possibilities that AI give us that we can't do as humans? I cannot talk about all these things at once, but I can show all these things at once. And that also helps create transparency and trust, which in the bots, you never know, is the bot hiding something? Is the bot sharing all the things? Much like a human. But that's what we see with a lot of other players. And some of the benefits are quite impressive. The reduction of time, how much people prefer to negotiate with such kind of platforms. So we're already seeing a lot of advancement in not only enjoying the efficiencies of this computational power and this reinvention, but we're also seeing that people are liking to do this negotiation more than the normal kind of negotiation, not just because of efficiency, but because of many other dimensions that we were measuring along the way. Now let's talk about the full automation mode. And so here, some of like Pactum AI is one of the pioneers in the field. I'm actually not invested in them, so just for a change. And so they've been around for quite a while. There's actually former founders of Skype who kind of took it on and decided to put AI there. They've been there way before the Gen AI revolutions of say 2022, at least for the broader public. And they do a rules-based model. So they go in, they program. Now, I don't know how, as of late, they've been doing. I'm assuming they're probably navigating the Gen AI a bit more as well in their system. But in the recent past, they would just kind of predict all the different possibilities. They will create rules for it, and then the system would intelligently navigate those rules. Luminous is one that did the first AI to AI, at least recorded negotiation. It basically had two LLMs that would then get a contract. So they had what? Thousands of non-disclosure agreements. That's what they actually did. And so both of them had thousands of non-disclosure agreements within that database. And so what they would do is that they will originate a first offer to one side, that's send it by email. The side two would then read it, make suggestions of changes, edit the document, send it back. And they basically had this back and forth through emails and rereading and the editing until they both actually got to a contract that they actually were satisfied with, which is that it's mind blowing away. Meaning the email thing seems a little bit archaic. Very, very soon they will probably be able to communicate with one another. But just the fact that the two of them can come to a solution by themselves and agree on something, and then upon review, that actually was a reasonable point of agreement, that was actually very impressive. Now, notice, the experiments are still being done a lot in legal and procurement fields, right? For several reasons. One, because they're high on data, they have very structured processes, and there's usually big power differences. And notice how the NDA contract is a contract where it's usually, there's not that many things for you to disagree on. Meaning most people tend to agree, okay, we do not disclose this information. Okay, some of the conditions are, but usually the conditions on an NDA discussion are not make or break at the very, for most contracts. Some, yes, but for most not. So it's a little bit like lower risk to play with those. And in procurement, usually buyers have more power. In legal, usually one side perceives to have more power. So that also helps a bit, as we'll see, because this is one of the problems that the systems still have. Yeah. Usually they're also done in long tail negotiations. So where's the opportunity right now? is in many big companies, they do thousands of exchanges or deals, but they don't negotiate because the cost of negotiating each of these small deals is not worth the time of a person. And so a lot of these deals go unnegotiated. And so what these platforms are doing now is they're trying to take care of those, because even if they make mistakes, it's mostly they're playing on an efficiency game. And if they don't close all deals, meaning they would not have negotiated those anyhow. So whatever they negotiate is already a gain, and the chances for making it worse is very small. And so those are the low cost opportunities and the easier, low risk places where people are playing those games right now, because there's more chance for experiment and for mistakes. But very soon, I expect that they will be starting to move more towards the center of our curve. Again, as I said, while they still don't are kind of they're end-to-end solutions, sometimes the setup cost of all of that still usually needs human input. And if you're doing big negotiations, not long tail ones, then maybe you also still need some element of oversight, if nothing else, for feedback and learning to feed back into the machine and correct some parameters that might not be processing the negotiation very well. So these are the three modes. Here's just an example of a screenshot of Pactum AI's website, and it shows that it's still like it is still a text-based, chat-based, kind of back and forth. It's just that it happens that in one side now they have a very well-trained bot doing the exercise of a negotiation for you, so you can imagine the savings that go with that and the efficiency that also happens. But it's not very transparent. It's not reinventing negotiation. It just transferred the negotiation process that we all know as humans into a bot, and it's just doing that as a machine more efficiently. Okay, so what is happening now? And probably that's already been hinted so far. The idea is that until not too long ago, we would classify negotiations when we're talking about AI as human to human, human to machine, machine to machine. Yeah. What are we starting to see now more and more? Something like that. Human machine to machine human. Notice different kinds of combinations, much based on the three modes that I mentioned before. So here will be a human still leading and just using a machine as the assistant mode. Here, though, you might have a fully automated with just some human still kind of inputting the data, but the machine seems to be doing the heavy work when the negotiation comes. And so where you put the letter and if it's a capital letter or not is just something I played with just for the fun of it, to understand what are the possible iterations and interactions that we can have. Here's just a little bit of a glossary. It doesn't really matter that much, but it's just so interesting to see the possibilities of how the collaboration can start taking so many forms and shapes, and we should be anticipating all of this diversity. Now, getting to the final part here, just a couple more slides. So what are the opportunities today? Today, what does AI do very well for negotiation? And you should be trying to already leverage that if you want, have the possibility, or if it matters for you. So first is you get this machine-like super strength, right? You're fast, you're efficient, you're consistent, you're scalable, you can process a lot of data, right? So all of that, it is now already delivering superior results because it overcomes a lot of our cognitive and emotional boundaries. It does reduce biases more than in humans. Again, please don't take it as AI doesn't have bias. There are plenty of colleagues of mine, including in other schools, that do research specifically on bias in AI. But it does reduce it. And partially because AI learns and adapts faster. So the feedback loop of an AI agent, negotiator, in correcting their own biases, if there are people working on that, means that your agent can eventually become much more better at handling their own biases and reducing those when negotiating than humans will have, just because our learning ability is a little bit slower. It does reduce costs and errors, improves compliance, because if you say these are your instructions, it's more likely to follow and not interpret too much. And then because there's no fatigue or variance, the repetitiveness, and that's what I mentioned already before, the long tail, that all tends to mean that on average, it can deliver superior results. As we advance, then we're going to see more and more of that. Now, what are some of the opportunities tomorrow? And right now, multi-issue negotiation is still hard. They can handle a few. It's not the computational power of it. They can do it. But the problem is that while AI can handle multi-issue negotiations already better than humans, we haven't yet seen what is the error rate and what are the problems. So as you can see on the side, there's a research I'll talk about soon. It does lower the risk of emotion and communication mistakes. It does generate consistency. So if you say, let's apply a certain strategy, even if the other side tries to manipulate or try to make you deviate from that strategy, Gen AI or AI agents are better at insisting, and many times that's where people fail. They start a strategy and they see a couple of data points that are showing that this strategy might not be working, but it could be more of an implementation problem than a strategic problem. And so people then drop the strategy and already start changing, and often way too soon. And staying the course a bit more is something that negotiators are the better ones do well. And AI can actually keep that and do that a little bit better because they are better at following the order and not getting too emotionally distracted or afraid that the strategy is not working. They will probably seek the data before they appreciate, okay, I need to change into another strategy. Which then means what? Part of the reason why they can be consistent is because they are resistant to pressure, manipulation, and others from the other side. And finally, because of that, we can also code a lot more ethicality and power restraint. And eventually we can start creating AI agents that are going to be much better at doing win-win, much better at not abusing of power, and hopefully creating a negotiation environment that's much more, funny enough, humane, and therefore much more conducive to superior deals, because no one is just trying to take advantage of the other. Now, that sounds exciting. For me, oh, sorry, I forgot to talk about the research. So this was a research that came just not too long ago, actually, on Science magazine. And basically, they did the following. They had several groups discussing an issue, a decision, with several groups taking different sides on that issue. Like as if you were having a community where different people and different groups are arguing that community should make a decision in different directions. And so what they would do is that they would have people then just have the discussion. Then they will have humans trying to summarize what was going on, to kind of give people direction, come up with new ideas, trying to consolidate and find common ground among all ideas, and then put that forward. And we see that there was no real positive effect on that exercise of mediation by the human, because the complexity of it was so much that the human was not able to capture all of it in a way that really moved the conversation forward as much. Whereas when using Gen AI, because of their ability to process so much more data and to condense all of it and merge all of it into what could be a mutual gain solution for all parties, then what ended up happening is that we saw a positive, no, I was not part of the research, I read it, but we as humans, we saw a positive correlation and a significant impact on how the AI impacted the success of the conversation. So this is very motivational. This is very exciting for many reasons, because this is not talking just about numbers. This is talking about subjective stuff, democracy stuff, the noisy, messy things about lots of people try to get together. Seeing that that tool can help us negotiate among ourselves, even these kind of issues, is very inspiring. So current limitations is still being used for small value, repetitive negotiations. It still struggle with subjective issues like rapport building. It still have should we be replicating traditional negotiation best practices, or will those best practices that the science have decades of learning, okay, this is what you should do here, will they work with AI agents? And what if AI agents are negotiating with other AI agents? Will we see a whole new slew of best practices? And if so, what are they? So we have this limitation of knowing what are best practices now that we're getting into this new space. I already mentioned this at least a couple of times, the ability to, or the disability to hallucinate and miscalculate, especially ethical violations, or even the idea of minor infractions. So for example, I just say one thing wrong and say, like, so how are you doing today? It looks like a beautiful day and you look beautiful today. Ooh, that sounds like sexual harassment. I'm walking away now. Oh, wow, that was a big jump. And so some AIs still do things like that because they're coded so strongly for certain violations that even things that could be remotely associated with it, the AI stops a little bit too early, maybe, instead of asking, what do you mean by that? Well, okay, that now starts sounding a lot worse. But giving people more the benefit of the doubt, so we need to start looking into how to overcome that. The idea that strategies vary, so you need to have a really good diagnostic ability. So that's still not yet implemented in AI agents that I've seen so far. They are coded for a certain strategy. They're not, and you can then change like in a dashboard, you can say, okay, go more this way, go more that way. But that's usually either early or you can do halfway, but then you are the one doing the diagnostic and guiding the agent. Agents changing strategy dramatically from win-lose to win-win or vice versa. I haven't seen that yet. There might be, I haven't seen it yet. And finally, while there's a tricky thing, because once you're negotiating with the AI agent, be it on training or semi-autonomous, or the challenge is that you can change very quickly the language, which gives you a sense that you're suddenly culturally appropriate, but you have not yet adjusted the style or the cultural awareness to make sure that you're actually negotiating in a way that is conducive to success in that culture. So it gives that kind of fake perception that you were culturally adaptive, but not. And then here we are going to our last slide, or one before last, sorry. What are the risks then? And I hope some of those already kind of became obvious to everyone because I mentioned them here and there. The first one is, if you know that the AI agent will negotiate following a certain strategy, and especially if you adopt that in a long tail or in many ways, other companies can already start learning how your agent works and start developing strategies to take advantage of your agent, see where the weaknesses are, test it with time, and eventually come up with a counter strategy that will actually maybe push the agent, the original agent, to hallucinate, make mistakes, and in the process take significant advantage. So real exploitation there. Then we might have the problem of incompatible platforms. As more and more people move towards AI agents as their negotiators, then we might have people using platform A, the other one B. So negotiating the platform becomes a problem. And of course, there will be a huge tendency for powerful companies to try to impose their platforms on others. Then there's the design for opportunism, like bots that will seem to be helpful, but because of their computational power and others, will try to see openings and little possibilities of taking advantage and then using unethical moves, especially we already see some AIs having biases towards different races or different genders. So some of that might replicate in negotiation as well. They might try to take advantage of some of the negotiation differences that different groups, minorities, and identities might have. And finally, trust might vary a lot with AI. So while we need the transparency and predictability to understand where AI agents are going and even have compliance methods and ethical controls and things of sorts, then the moment that you become way too transparent, is like opening your code or opening your bottom line to the other side, then of course people try exploiting that as well. So as you can see, the main risks are mistakes and exploitation, right? The same that you would see with humans, just at a different level. So what is the big question then at the end of the day for all of us? I think is, are we just, in a way, doing what we used to do better? In other words, is it a tool? Or are we trying to think about it as a game changer and really think about not just replicating what we do as humans in AI and just doing it faster, quicker, and cheaper? Or are we thinking about what does AI enable me to do negotiation-wise that I couldn't do before? And how can I then put that into my new platform agent or others so that I can have not just a better negotiator, but close to an optimal negotiation, given the AI capabilities? So this is what I wanted to share with you. Taking advantage that you're here, and given that in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be hosting another webinar now on healthcare. Let me just put here very quickly, if you want to take a picture or a screenshot, with my co-authors, Rodrigo Gouveia and Hervé Lamarque, and my good friend and colleague, Stephen Chick, from the Healthcare Management Initiative. My co-authors and I, we published this book, Pharma, Price, and Power, which is coming out at the end of this month, beginning of the next one. And so this will be a webinar where we're going to address some of our findings on the negotiation of prices of pharmaceuticals and how that impacts our life so much, not only through our taxes, but also our health. I hope you will be excited to join us for this one as well. Without further ado, let me invite Francesca. Francesca, thank you so much. Please.
Thank you, Horacio. That was quite a meaty discussion, and you know, it's quite the eye opener, I should say, that we don't really get you know, day in and day out here. I do have a few questions coming from the audience here. One that's been upvoted a lot from Sandeep Ghosh. It's how does one realize the competitive advantage with AI if the party they are negotiating with is also using AI?
Yeah, so I think that at the end of the day, remember, that's why we said game changer or tool. And for a while, I think that right now, AI is just a really, really good tool for negotiators, but still a tool. And so like a sword or a hammer or a saw, it will depend a lot on the skill of the person who wields the tool. And so I think that what I hope it will not happen, at least in the next few years, is that people will start trusting, okay, so AI is doing everything. I don't need to become better at negotiation. On the contrary, at this stage, at least, I think that you should be looking at AI as a booster for you to improve your negotiation skills, and including your negotiation skills to manage that teammate, the AI agent. So seeing now it's what I think is one of the coolest thing about AI is that now you never have to go negotiate alone anymore. You can always be in a team. And actually, the research is very clear on that. Team negotiations usually generate superior deals, not only by increasing the pie for everyone involved, but also by helping you claim a better share of the pie than you would have if you were doing it alone. What is one of the problems usually with team negotiations is the coordination cost. But given that here, the coordination cost, you control completely what the AI is going to do with you because you're basically telling them what to do and they're providing you with good information. Those coordination costs are as limited as is your knowledge, or reversely, right? So it's negative correlated with your knowledge of how to manage the AI. So if you can manage the AI really well, you have this super teammate, this super tool, and you become a master at doing negotiation at a very low cost. So I hope I answered. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, on
Okay.
that note, we have another question from an anonymous audience or attendee here, and it kind of relates to your HM2MH
Yeah.
kind of acronym here. Is
This example, yeah.
do you ever see a world where AI is directly negotiating with AI, essentially being kind of the representatives of humans like us, and
Yeah.
those kind of agents knowing exactly what we want, how we want it, et cetera, and what our negotiation points are?
I do. I very much do. And so some of that is already happening. Remember the Luminous example?
Mhm.
2 LLMs, emails. So of course, you have to feed them the data. You have to feed them your wants. So for example, the VNTech system and the Pactum AI system, what you do need to do is you need to go in and you need to input your, let's call it utilities, meaning what do you want? What do you not want? Do you want A more than B, B more than C? And you need to give some sense of your preferences so that the computer can then make smart trade-off choice and go, okay, no, I remember that Horacio wants A more than B and B more than C. Okay, so how about offering that?
Mm.
So while that input is still needed, and it might change, so how the input comes along. And then the beauty is that once you do have that, I could see the computers going back and forth, no problem at all. It's somewhat already happening. So that part is not too far out. I think it will just mean the moment we have more companies using it, that's when you're just going to see that becoming very ubiquitous, very part of our day-to-day. And the nice thing about that is that once you give that input, they can negotiate many times with the same input. And so you don't have to be consulted for every negotiation. That's one great advantage, the scalability that we mentioned earlier. Of course, you just need to come back when, okay, now that we have huge tariffs again, okay, what do I change in my negotiation? So you need to always remember that when you're having your agents negotiating that automatically for you 24/7, because you're doing without the bots, so they don't need to sleep, you also need to be very aware that they are following the instructions you gave back when. And as soon as the market changes or you're in a different business cycle or something of sorts, you need to remember to kind of come in, call your agent, your employee again and say, hey, different instructions now. And so you cannot sleep on that either. And you have to be careful that your AI agent doesn't stay with the same instructions for way too long, and in doing so, closing bad deals on your behalf.
Where do I sign up, right? I'm sold.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
It can help us day to day. And I guess on that note, a personal question on my end, and probably something that a lot of students, attendees are also asking, is around where do we start, right? What are maybe some practical things that we can do now to essentially take advantage of this opportunity and where it's headed in the future?
Thank you. So, well, first, hopefully paying attention to different voices like mine, but of course, many others. What are we learning? What are we doing? Where things are going? Because the next big opportunity might be one step away, right? And so we don't know exactly who's going to actually find that step. But being at the frontier, remember I said earlier on, there's an early learning curve advantage. And so again, not that I'm already sharing here, do this, do that, but at least making sure you're around that line. And so the moment it moves, you're ready to move with it. I think that's important. The second one is giving the 3 modes I mentioned on an individual level, play with the preparation part I mentioned, like start already seeing the AI as your teammate, because that's the quickest return on investment you can have negotiation wise by leveraging AI. And just by doing that, you're going to start learning possibilities. You're going to start having new ideas. You're going to start asking things. You're going to start seeing, moments in the negotiation where you go like, I could have used this. I could have done that. And then if you can do also, take a look at the companies around, meaning they're trying to push some of that frontier. What are they doing different? And some of those you can actually even just borrow and do with your own Gen AI platform. Some of it you might need for your company, and you might have to talk to some of them. But I think that on an individual level, just already just consider now, why will I negotiate alone if I don't have to anymore? Yeah. Why am I going to leave my partner at home? Think about Batman Robin if you want. Why am I going to leave Robin at home? Meaning you can, but you don't have to.
Love that. Everyone needs a little support, right? Especially in this
There you go.
context. We do have a few more minutes for some more questions. One question that popped up is around kind of metrics and KPIs. So
Yeah.
what metrics should we use to judge essentially whether AI is actually a game changer in negotiation versus it just staying as a tool?
So for me, thank you for the question. And for me, the game changer thing is a little bit the scenario mentioned a couple of questions back, is when we can really just like outsource and you go negotiate. That's one aspect of it, because it really will change the dynamic of how deals will be closed between companies. And the second game changer aspect is the element that I mentioned with the last slide, which is, are we just asking bots to do what we as humans do, somewhat the same, exchanging words that are ambiguous, that could be misinterpreted and create miscommunication and things of sorts. And eventually we start getting better at that, but still it's just us a little faster. Or are we reinventing the negotiation process? That for me will be a game changer. Are we reinventing? Are we doing more of a graphical interface? Are we doing something that is quicker? Or are we allowing something where we can find out if the other bot is coming in with complete transparency, and then we both just share everything very quickly, and then they optimize, and then within a minute they return it to us? That will be game changing, right? Because 2 of the biggest inefficiencies in negotiation is the relationship aspect and the communication aspect. Communication is an imperfect method of transferring information. It's the best we have, but it's imperfect. And relationship, if you don't trust, then you even relate less information because you're afraid of being taken advantage of. So if we can have AI cover these 2 things for us and use their computational power to imagine possibilities, and once we start having more creativity as well, not just replication of what was done before, then those things will be game changer. Now, metrics. Okay, what is the error rate? How many bad deals are you doing? Second, how bad are the bad deals? Meaning, are they just marginally bad? Oh, we can live with that. Humans do that every day. Or are they like orders of magnitude bad, which can take eventually a company to go bankrupt with one bad deal, right? So that will be a game changer. Then are we managing to rewrite and get good results with reducing communication and relationship issues? Because at some point we could envision even AI doing not just long tail negotiations, but actually strategic negotiations, partnership negotiations. But those usually deal with more the subjective aspects, which AI is not doing as much. And so I would think that if we start looking at those measures, the measure of success, but more the measure of rate, how bad it is, and how much are we actually transforming? It's more of a the last one, more of a procedural metric for now. Hopefully we will soon then be able to measure how good are the outcomes and just take it from there. Remember, on the error rate, there's also the vulnerability to other people trying to program a strategy that takes advantage of ours. And then, of course, the ethics, the bias, and I'm including all of those in the error rate. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you for that. And I can't help but kind of look back at my experience being in the business development partnerships world, where a lot of negotiations, at least in the past few years post-COVID, has been happening online, right? And that's been and so in the context of using AI as a tool, as a partner, that could really be helpful. But we do have a question here from Chris Melliff, which is around kind of face-to-face meetings. How do we integrate these technologies in such a setting where it's mostly face-to-face types of negotiations in a practical way?
Okay. So partially, for example, imagine we're negotiating over a platform like this. Yeah. Still face-to-face, meaning it's not presential, but let's call that as close to face-to-face as you can in a virtual setting. I could be the same way that I might, if I have a teammate in the screen, I might have been chatting with the WhatsApp or chatting with that person. I could be doing the same here real time with my AI agent that I pre-trained, or at least I pre-prepared for this negotiation. So even if it's not a whole training, it's just a preparation, at least there'll be a little bit of memory and it will help me run some scenarios. I could say like, okay, they just said that. I have no idea what to say. Or, okay, what if they just had this idea? Does it seem good for you? Does it not? So I can actually have that checking in and that sanity check of mine even. It's like, am I doing good things? Am I not? And all of that can add value to the negotiation. So I think that's one thing. But I think there's something even more fascinating, which is we could actually start putting the AI agent as a neutral in the room. And so both of us on the opposite sides, let's call it, that's counterparties. Let's not, I don't like opposite sides much, but just as counterparties, as we bring in this neutral, we know in theory that that party, that third neutral AI agent, doesn't have a preference for you or for me. And so if we just say, hey, try to optimize the deal for both of us, given that this is what we're looking for, what do you suggest we do? And so if you do that transparently in front of the counterparty, then there's no reason for them to distrust that move. And then you have the AI agent actually working for both of you and reducing a lot of barriers and hopefully creating an incentive for people to input the truth in there so that better outcomes, better ideas will come out and enrich your conversation. So that would be another way. In all fairness, I haven't tested that yet, but I've been planning and trying to see if there's a new opportunity for me to do so. If anyone does try it, let me know. I would love to know how it goes. Yeah, and if you want to prepare to do it so that you at least know that when you're doing it as well prepared as you can, I'll be glad to collaborate with you on that just to find out how it plays out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the way I'm hearing this is, or understanding all of this, is that it does have the capacity to make negotiations just a bit less complex.
Less complex, yes.
Yes.
Less competitive as well, even I would argue.
Less competitive. And so what exactly does that mean, right? In terms of like outcomes, and is that better, right, for the world, especially as you think about not just like business negotiations, but peace negotiations, for example, in a more kind of in a broader context. I think I got a few questions here about that as well.
Okay, so hopefully I got it. If I don't, just stop me and redirect me. But the way I see it, one of the problems that we have in negotiation that people talk a lot about is, oh, we left money on the table. Oh, we left money on the table. Oh, we left money on the table. That's one big one. The other one is like, oh, I think they took advantage of me. And so these two fears make people create too many buffers and play too safe sometimes, or become too aggressive to make sure that they are not the weak ones on the table. And all of these fears and these reactions to those fears create significant inefficiencies and waste. If we know that we are in a process where these things are less likely to happen, and that we are more likely to optimize the value and the creativity for everyone's benefit, just the fact that you know that you're getting as best a deal as you could, given the context, most people go, I'm fine. Actually, if you were to ask most people, and they'll say, do you want to negotiate win-win and win-lose, or win-lose, meaning win-win without power, win-lose with power? Most people say, no, I prefer to negotiate without power. I don't want to squeeze the other. Most people say, I just use power to defend myself. What do they mean by defend myself? It's not defend from the other person's power. It's defend myself from my own fear. It's defend myself from my own fear of not getting what I think I should get, or I deserve, or I want to get. But if they feel like, okay, but I'm going to get most of that or all of that without having to use that power, that pressure to defend myself, because there's nothing to defend against, because the AI is in between helping both of us, then we're much more likely to get superior deals where there's less waste, there's more satisfaction, there's less attrition, there's less need for you to do unethical moves or things of sorts. And so I think that not just from a value distribution perspective, you bring more value, you get more value. So I'm not saying that everyone gets the same. If you contribute more, if you are more innovative, if you have a new technology, then you might deserve a bigger pay. But that the AI can help us do. But the fact is it will do with less waste, and it will do it faster and with less attrition. So it would help us on a value level, I think it would also improve relationships. It will make processes faster, easier, and therefore it will also make us feel better overall, not just because of what we got, but by how we behaved. Because we did, I know of many people who negotiate and afterwards they feel like, and then I had to yell at the person, and I had to put pressure, and I had to threaten to walk away. And I don't like to do that. Meaning, a few people do. They love the competitive dynamics. But most people I teach, they actually said, I would much rather prefer if it didn't feel like it's dog eat dog kind of world. I'd much rather have a conversation, allocate the value, everyone is happy and go home. But because it's hard to find it, then people then tend to resort to most those other tactics that they usually are not as proud of. So that's a little bit of my hope in that direction. Yeah, I would say.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you for your perspective there. And I think we're running out of time here, but I think we'll take like one last question, if that's okay with you.
And I'll try to be brief.
So I guess how does the dynamic change when you think about, and this is from Monique Knife, if I'm not if I'm pronouncing that correctly, how does that dynamic change when you have like multi-party negotiations?
Okay.
Yeah, can you just make a note on that?
All right. I just said I was going to try to be brief.
Here
Okay.
we go.
I will have to be brief because this question could be a whole other hour. Just because one of the things that I teach in my class is when you do bilateral negotiation, the theory out there is really solid. The moment you start talking about multi-party negotiation, the theory is not yet there. Meaning, for most bilateral negotiation problems you bring me, I feel like I have enough theory to give you a good answer, like a solid answer. Maybe not the perfect answer, but a solid answer. There are questions in multi-party that I'll go, I have no idea, right? Because it's exponentially more complicated. 2 people, 1 interaction. 3 people, it's not just 1 more interaction. Now you have a combinatorial exercise. And so the more people you add, the more. Now, that's the beauty, like the research I showed on the democracy discussion and opinions there, where we saw the AI-mediated discussion having a positive correlation with success. This is actually very inspiring because part of the problem with multi-party is, as I mentioned before, relationship. People start using coalitions as a power tool. And communication. You have much less time to talk, and it's so much more chaotic for you to listen to everyone and absorb a broader amount of information and then manage to craft all of that into one potential solution is a combinatorial cognitive challenge. And so the AI can greatly help there. I think actually the potential for us to see a game changer on multi-party is higher than on the bilateral side.
Interesting. Amazing. Yeah. Well, that's super exciting.
Yeah, so yeah, same here. Thank you.
Yeah. Any last comments on your end?
So no, I would just say embrace it. If you have questions, reach out. If you want to try to do experiments and would like some help with that to find more things, please do reach out. If you're interested in learning a bit more about the 2 companies I mentioned, Connect and Value Negotiation Tech, VA and Tech, feel free to reach out as well. But then again, I actually just wish you luck in your negotiations. That's actually what I want.
Well, thank you. Thank you for, again, an amazing discussion here. And thank you, everyone, for all of your questions. And we're so sorry we cannot address every single question, but we'll be sure to keep you guys updated with how this is all evolving so far. So without further ado, I'll end the session now. And thanks again for tuning in.
Francesca, thanks for the mediation of the session. Excellent job as well.
You're very welcome. Goodbye. Have a good day.